Okay, we'll continue. The voice is slowly coming back, getting there. Lamed Hamid Bays, 35b. We'll do a similar thing to what we did yesterday. We'll learn the whole Gemara, and we'll get out the B'Shulchan Aruch, because again, there's lots of opinions. We'll try to cover, and generally speaking, all of them. The Alter Rebbe is going to mention most of them. We'll learn the Gemara with Rashi's opinion, and then kind of introduce some of the other ones and where they're coming from, and then we'll get to the halacha. So yesterday we talked about the box itself, the tefillin itself getting ripped, broken, whether it's two of the boxes or three of the boxes or near each other, not near each other, new, old, the stitchings, etc. Now we get to the rip of the straps, which will include, by inference, what the minimum size of the straps are, which is important to know for halacha when something rips by accident, if your tefillin is still kosher or not. And likewise, it's also going to help us if you're on Mitzvahim and you're sharing tefillin with other people, to know what are the primary parts of the straps, both on the head and the hand, and like what you can get away with when you're rushing. You want to put on tefillin, someone has 30 seconds, and these things happen. To know what the minimums to be able to get away with. Even though, of course, we're doing it the best way possible, but you should, the way we wear our tefillin are, again, the best way possible. But if you need to, for whatever reason, get the minimum, you should know what's halacha and what's required and what's extra, etc. And that's kind of going to emerge a bit now as we discuss the halacha of ripped ritzuos, and therefore what the minimum size for ritzuos for straps are. Okay. So Lamed Hamid Beis, 35b. Second line, last word. Abaye Rav Yosef kamed Rav Yosef. Abaye was sitting in the presence of Rav Yosef. Ifsikale, Ritzua de Tefilli. The strap of his tefillin ripped. Amar lei. So Abaye told Rav Yosef, Ma'olim biktirei, can you repair it? Exactly in what way was he suggesting you repair it? Was he telling him to stitch it? Was he telling him to tie it? All kinds of discussions. But at any rate, Amar Lei, Rav Yosef told him, I can't. Why? Because Amar Lei told him, the pasuk says, Ukshartam, you shall bind it, you shall make a knot. See, if that's what's written, should take Shira Tama, the binding, the knot, should be complete, should be wholesome. A few implications to that.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
By ripped,
tore.
Does it mean like it has a rip in it, or
no? It's severed.
Or severed.
It's severed. Yeah.
Severed. Oh, okay.
Severed. Yeah.
That's what we're talking about. Length of tefillin.
Length of strap, because it's ripped. It's severed.
So
yeah.
It's not just a.
No, it's severed.
Is that if it's just like ripped partly, like a quarter or halfway? Is that okay?
It's a good question. We'll get into that because there's also. Morning. There's also a minimum for how wide the ritzuos have to be.
Okay.
So if it's ripped after the minimum length, then it's fine anyway.
Okay.
If it's ripped within the minimum length, it has to be. It can't be ripped. If it's ripped too much to the point that it loses its minimum width, it also becomes a problem. The minimum width we're not going to actually directly discuss today, but it's the general answer to the question.
When you say you mean torn apart completely?
Now we're talking about torn apart completely. It's severed. Severed.
Totally severed. Okay.
So Rav Yosef said, I can't repair the ripped ritzuos, the straps, good morning, because the pasuk says that the binding has to be complete and wholesome. What does it mean, complete and wholesome? So the way Rashi explains, when you have a second knot, that's not beautiful. It's lacking beauty. So it doesn't look as nice when you have knots on your tefillin. There's one knot, that should be nice, and that's it. So there's a little of a nuance here, which would change the halacha. For example, let's read the next line. But anyway, he said, I can't fix it because the pasuk says the knot has to be beautiful, and then if I just took the severed strap and tied it back together, it wouldn't look nice. So Amar Lei, Rav Acha B'rei Rav Yosef. Rav Acha, the son of Rav Yosef, told Rav Ashi, or asked Rav Ashi, Ma'al mitvei v'ayli litzvil legov. Can I stitch it back together in such a fashion that the stitching remains on the inside? And thus, it would still look nice on the outside. In other words, if the concern is not that there be one complete knot and nothing else, but the concern is that it should look pretty, it should look nice. So you have your one knot and it's stitched on the inside. There's ways to do this where you don't see the seam on the outside, and then it still looks beautiful. So Omar, Rav Ashi responded to Rav Acha, Pok Chazim Mai Amadavar. Go look out, go look into the streets and go see what people do. It's an expression to me like, see what people do? What does that mean? And how do I know what people did back in ancient Talmudic times? So Rashi says this is an expression of, go look. Nobody does that, come on. And therefore, it means to be stringent and not allow stitching. In Rashi's view, the issue of the knot being beautiful is that there should be one knot and no more. That's the way he understands Rav Yosef's statement earlier, which said that the tefillin have to have a beautiful knot. This means to say that there should be one knot and no more. More than that, it becomes not nice anymore. And therefore, the fact that it's stitched on the inside doesn't help me. You have two knots already. It's not a wholesome knot. But Rabbi Tam says that he cites other examples in the Gemara where the Gemara uses this expression, go look and see what people do, as actually not a reason to be strict, but a reason to be lenient. Go look what people do. Everybody does it. Everybody stitches their tefillin, so you can do it too.
Really?
It's exactly the reverse. Sorry?
People stitch their tefillin?
In ancient Talmudic times, apparently. They stitch their straps when... I would imagine today it's easy to produce straps and we can buy a new one, no problem. But I guess in those days, it was a precious commodity, it's expensive, so people stitch them together. Anyway, Tosfos cites the other examples where the Gemara uses this expression, Puk Chazim Mayam Dabar, go see what people do, as a reason to be lenient, not strict. Which would mean that Rabbi Tam, when he translates the Gemara earlier, which said that it should be a beautiful strip, a beautiful knot or strap, his concern is aesthetics. And therefore, if you can stitch it in such a fashion where it remains beautiful, that is, the stitchings on the inside and the outside looks seamless, why not? So here you have a dispute whether or not you're allowed to stitch severed straps. If it's knotted, for sure not. And if it's stitched in such a fashion where the stitches on the outside doesn't look good, for sure not. But if it's stitched on the inside, where the outside aesthetics look nice, Rashi would say no, that the knot has to be wholesome and singular. Tosfos would say yes, because it still has beauty, it still looks good. This is already one machlekes in halacha. Okay, we'll conclude this section of the Gemara because it includes more, and then we'll get to the halacha from the Shulchan Aruch. Papa says, Gardume ritzues, the remnant of the straps. So as Rashi explains it, after you finish tying the tefillin, and let's just assume right now we're talking about the head tefillin, because again we're going to learn it with Rashi, but then I'm going to introduce some other interpretations. So if you tied your head tefillin, and you have your straps hanging on the other side, on the side, or the back, wherever they're hanging, and then you cut it, or maybe it's torn at the end of the requisite amount, and you have a little remnant, you have little like little strands hanging off the end. So it says there, Papak Shadis, it still remains a valid pair. Don't think that the remnant strings. Yeah, it's stub, but the point is it's not flat. It has little straps hanging off, like little strings that are hanging at the end. Right? When you rip something, it doesn't rip straight like a scissor would cut it straight. It has it's frayed. That's the word, frayed.
The length of what remains, maybe.
We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
The length we'll get to in a second. But here's talking about after the length, where you have little remnant. You have little.
No, to me that's what part of my thing means.
It's remnant. You'll see in a second. This is remnant.
Yeah, what remains. Yeah, like what I call this.
Not just no. It's after the cut. It's after. We'll see which was. You talk about the little remnant.
Little threads.
Little threads. That doesn't invalidate the tefillin.
Strands of thread.
Yes, it's after the shear. The Gemara is going to explain. But the Gemara says v'lav milsi. This statement from Rabbi, which says that the little strands at the end don't invalidate the tefillin, is not something to be concerned. Not a accurate statement. Why? Because the children of Rabbi Chia made the following statement: the little remnant, the little frayed strings at the end of your tzitzis, strings, they're ripped and the little frays. Vegadumi Ezov, and little remnant straps of Ezov. Ezov is a kind of wood, I think.
Hyssop.
What's it called?
Hyssop.
Hyssop.
Well,
It's
Yeah,
called-
holy herb.
which was used to sprinkle for the paraduma
Barduma.
and other things where they were sprinkling. The temple used the special strip. So when you cut it at the end, it was frayed, and that's a kosher. So the Gemara is commenting from the fact that the Rabbi listed these two items as allowed to have these little frayed strands and didn't mention tefillin, means that tefillin should not have these little remnant straps. It should be cut nicely. And the Gemara explains why. Because wholesome there, with respect to tzitzis and ezor, this hyssop, which you use to, hyssop, as you pronounce it?
Yeah,
Which was meant to sprinkle the various items in the temple times. Tashmishi mitzvah. They themselves are not the object of a mitzvah. They are in the service of a mitzvah. But they themselves are not the mitzvah. That's what they are. Aval with respect to tefillin, tashmishi kedusha ninu. The very object of the tefillin is itself holy, and therefore it itself deserves a certain level of respect, even more than things that serve a mitzvah. In other words, there are different levels of holiness inferred onto items with which we do a mitzvah. And the question is if the thing itself becomes an item of holiness, or whether or not the thing is in the service of a mitzvah. The classic example is a Sefer Torah versus the Ark with the Sefer Torah. The Sefer Torah is itself an object of holiness. It's Tashmish Kedusha. It itself contains holiness. The Ark doesn't contain holiness in and of itself. It's only in that it serves it serves something holy. It serves something holy, and that's its holiness. So it's a lesser degree of holiness because it itself. So, and therefore the Gemara says, with respect to the other things, tzitzis and the ezov, that wood, that hyssop that they used to sprinkle the blood, they're in the service of a mitzvah. They themselves aren't an object of a mitzvah, whereas the tefillin is itself an object of holiness and therefore requires to have a nice cut. But now the Gemara says, from the fact that you're discussing the frayed strands at the end of your cut, michlal, the implication is the islish yura. The implication is that you have to have a certain length of the tefillin. In other words, you can't just tie it and leave it there. You have to have some strap. From the fact that you're telling me that when you cut the strap at the end, make sure not to have little frays because it should look nice, because it's a tashmish kedusha, it's an object of holiness, you're implying that there's actual minimum length to the strap. So what is that? Again, we're going with Rashi's interpretation. We're talking about the head tefillin. The head tefillin requires a certain length. And one might argue, I'm suggesting, I haven't said this, read anywhere, that the reason why the Gemara doesn't address the hand tefillin length is because the hand tefillin length, you need the requisite amount to get whatever it is you have to get done on your hand, which we'll get to in a moment. What's the exact minimum you have to do on your hand? What's custom and what's an actual law? But for now, the Gemara is implying that after you tie your head tefillin, there has to be some strap. This is the way we're understanding from Rashi. So the Kamash Yura, what's the length that the head tefillin need to be? So Amar Rami Bar Chama says, Amar Reish Lakish Reish Lakish, Ad Etzbot Tzireda. It should be the length till the, in Rashi's interpretation, index finger. You're talking about the head tefillin, and it should go down to the index finger. Starting from where? Starting from where? So the Gemara explains. Rav Kana says that when Reish Lakish said to use the index finger as your marker for length, Machrei Kafuf, he did a bent measurement. Rav Ashi Machrei Pashut. Rav Ashi did a straight measurement. What's the difference in a bent measurement and a straight measurement? Bent measurement, the implication is it's smaller because you need to squeeze it in. So therefore, the way Rashi interprets it as follows: the straight measurement is the length between the edge of the thumb and the edge of the index finger. That's the straight measurement. It's longer, so it's about that big. It's not that long. And the other one is between the index finger and the middle finger, and that's why it's called bent, because it's much tighter. So two different interpretations about how long the head tefillin have to be. It's very short. Here, between here and here, between here and here. The halacha is it gets a little longer, as we'll learn. But this is mamish the bare minimum. Rabba, the Gemara concludes as to what the. So now we know you have to have a minimum length, either, at least in Rashi's version, either the distance between my thumb finger and my index finger, or the distance between my middle finger and my index finger. That's how long the head tefillin have to be after the strap. It's very short. right? It's very short. We're going to get in a second, we'll learn a little bit how it gets longer.
Just to your neck about it.
We'll learn a little bit more. It gets a little bit longer. It's like the heart. So we'll see.
But on this interpretation, right?
This is the bare minimum halacha. But the Goinim, the post,
The thing here, and then just fall to the bottom of your
we're
neck.
going a little bit longer actually.
Like
To
here to here.
in halacha,
3 inches.
in halacha
No,
goes.
I mean, just the way we just learned.
It's very little. It might not even make it around to your neck.
Yeah, that's it.
Really, wouldn't make it around your neck. It's between the distance between your thumb and your index, between your index and between your index and your middle finger. It's very little. But now that we know you have extra straps and that there's a minimum, so the Gemara now gives different things people would do. Rabbi, katalahu, who pashit, vishadilahu. Rabbi would tie his tefillin around the back of his head, would leave some behind, and then let it hang in back. Let the straps hang in the back of him. Rabbi Acha bar Yaakov, son of Yaakov, katalahu, would tie it, matlislahu, and then he would braid it. He would take the two straps and braid them together. Make it look nice. I don't know. And Mar Berei Ravina Avid Kididan. Mar Berei Ravina would do it like us, meaning, or maybe Didan means like on the breast, meaning you would hang it in the front the way we do it here. 3 different things people would do in the back there. I just want to point out that it seems to me from the way the Gemara is describing it that they would actually tie it every day. It wasn't like they had a knot like we did and then just, it seems like they would open and untie it every day. This is the way the Gemara describes it. He tied it, left extra, and then hung it behind him. It almost sounds like they would tie it every time they put it on. I'm not 100% sure about that, but it seems to me. No? It's different the way the Gemara's language. Okay.
Yeah, they just don't chart them literally.
Yeah, tie it on their head every day. Okay, so as you just said, this is one understanding, which is said that the Gemara is talking about the head tefillin, the aruch. And others seem to imply, as Taisus points out, that the Gemara is talking about the hand tefillin, and then when it says to your middle finger, when it says tzreida, to your finger, which we translated as the index finger, it actually means to the middle finger. Right? The Gemara said ad tzreida, until tzreida, ad etzba tzreida, till the finger that's called tzreida. What's that? Rashi said it meant the index finger, and then 2 different versions between the thumb and the index finger, between the index finger and the middle finger. Taisvis quotes from others that say that it actually means the hand tefillin, and the tzreida means the middle finger, and the difference between the bent and the straight is when you're measuring the length between your arm, or whether it's tied, and your middle finger, is it when your middle finger is standing up straight, or when your middle finger is bent like that? So it's a little bit shorter, that's the difference. At any rate, all these different opinions, and as I mentioned, Rashi, Taisus quotes this as well, we have from the Goinim, which means from the post-Gemara age, they received an oral tradition that the tefillin of the head should go on one side to the tabor, to the tabor is the navel, and the other side to the heart. Rambam says both to the heart. Mishnah Berurah says at least 2 tefachim. I'm not sure. Balosel Kedal Alter B'Shulchan Aruch. It passed around with Alter B'Shulchan Aruch. Again, we'll do it in English. So we'll read through it in English easier. Halacha 6 is from the same chapter yesterday. It's Orach Chaim 33:6, bottom left. Okay, once the strap is severed, it cannot be rectified. This is based on our Gemara, neither by tying nor by sewing. This restriction is derived from the word ukshartam, and you shall bind them, which our sages interpret, as we just saw in our Gemara, kesher tam, should be a wholesome knot, meaning a binding which is intact, i.e. the straps, which with the tefillin are bound in place, should be intact and complete, not tied or sewn together. This is Rashi's interpretation. That it should be one knot and it should be wholesome. So no sewing, no stitching.
That's for the hand tefillin, right?
Sorry?
We're talking about the hand tefillin now?
So, not that it doesn't make a distinction yet.
Okay.
He talks about both of them. Right? Because the ripping of the head, the Gemara didn't make a distinction yet. The Gemara ripping just said anything. Later when we talked about the length, then it's a question of what we're talking about, the head or the hand tefillin, which we'll get into in a moment. So when does the above apply? When the straps are severed within their minimum required length. This means, so now, in other words, once it's ripped after the required length, then what's the difference? You already have your required length of tefillin. Right? That's why I said these 2 halachas in the Gemara combined together, the issue of ripping and the issue of length. Because once it's torn after the minimum required length, your tefillin is still kosher. Doesn't matter. So what is the minimum required length? This means, with regard to the head tefillin, at least long enough to reach down to the navel on the right strap and to the chest on the left strap. Even though I mentioned the Mishnah Berurah writes 2 tvachim, 2 handbreadths, but this is the way Alter writes it. With regard to the arm tefillin, this means that the strap must be as long at least long enough to do your required minimum. So what's your required minimum, right? The head tefillin, once you're tied on the back of it, there's nothing else to do, just let it hang with the minimum length. And we just described right strap, right side navel, left side chest or heart. Even though the halacha, even though the Chabad custom is to let it go much longer, to get it go much, much longer. But this is their minimum. When it comes to the hand tefillin, you have to have it long enough to do the minimum required stuff. So what's the minimum required? To be around the upper arm, in order to securely bind the tefillin to the arm. That's the basic mitzvah. Tie your tefillin to your arm next to your heart. So you have to have enough strap to be able to tie it around your arm. So if you have a bigger bicep, you need longer. If you have smaller, you need less. Excuse me. And then to be extended to reach the middle finger. Does not say that it has to go around your arm 7 times. That's custom. Minimum requirement is tie it around your arm, tie it to your arm, to your bicep once, not 2 more times as we do it. So minimum requirement, 1 knot at the top, straight line to your middle finger. No coils around your hand. This is not that's custom, not minimum. So minimum, securely bind it to the arm, and then extend it to reach the middle finger, and be coiled around it 3 times. Even though the 3 times aren't, even that is not mamish minimum. It can be even less, but at least for the length it has to go around 3 times. And then to be tied in place around the hand. And this is something I want to make a note of. The fact that we tuck the tefillin in the end, when we tie our tefillin, and we tuck it into the end over here, is not just for convenience to hold it in place. It's actually halacha. It's actually halacha. It's got to be tied. There are those that say it's got to be a full knot. There are those who make a full knot down here. The Rebbe only tucked it in. But at least that, it's got to be tucked in. It's not just for convenience. It's actually for halacha. It's got to be tied at the end. This is the minimum. Top up here, middle finger, 3 times, let's say, and then around the hand and tucked in. It's actual halacha. So if you're ever helping someone put on tefillin, this is your minimum.
The strap, the end of the strap, has to show the black part, not the beige part.
Even when you're tucking it in? When you're tucking it in, I think it's fine.
That's what Itchy was telling me.
That even here?
When you wrap it around you wind it around.
Yeah.
And then the end piece, which is...
You tuck it in.
Tuck it in.
And then you do it again, hide it to...
Hide
yeah,
the
okay.
Hide the back part. Like
hide the back part so the black is sticking out.
You only see black.
Okay. Sorry?
Wrapping it around your arm 3 times. Here it says several times.
Where?
4th to last line. As to the entire additional length of the strap, which enables it to be wound several times around the arm.
Yeah, keep on reading.
Tying or sewing a severed strap does not disqualify it.
Right, because that part is not the required part.
Severed.
We're using severed strap as a way to get to the minimum length, even though minimum length is otherwise. Right? What's the minimum length? He began this paragraph by saying that if it's ripped within the minimum length, it's invalid. So what's the minimum length? Minimum length is tying at the strap at the head. We said it goes down to the navel and to the heart, and then the hand. You got to do your minimum. What's your minimum? Securely bind it to your hand, and then around the finger, and then tucked in at the end to tie it, secure it at the end. Anything more than that doesn't disqualify it when it's ripped, because more than that is not required anymore. It's custom.
I thought when we're talking about this, I thought he's changing to go. He's talking about the head tefillin at the beginning. Then he's moving into another subject, the arm tefillin.
And then that's what he said. He said with regard to he introduced it with regard to the head tefillin, etc. Then with regard to the arm tefillin, etc. Okay.
Oh, okay. Excuse me.
So it says as to the entire additional length of the strap, which enables it to be wound several times around the arm, that's extra. That's not minimum requirement. And if for tying or sewing severed straps does not disqualify it because it's already after your minimum.
No, I see the sentence above. I missed the
Okay.
sentence above.
So are we doing it right and the Sephardics are doing it wrong?
No, God forbid.
Because they wrap it all funny.
That's all extra. That's not minimum. Again, there's a difference between minimum, custom, and minimum. So I said the minimum requirement is this. Everybody agrees. Custom is everybody has different customs. Some people do more than 7 straps. People do this. Custom is different. We're talking about the minimum requirement. Sorry?
Some do more than 7 straps?
I've seen some with more than 7. I don't know if it's by accident, but I've seen people with more than 7 straps, yeah.
But the Sephardim do it like a whole thing.
So the Ashkenazim make a shin over here, Chabad makes a shin up here, Sephardim do a shin in a different direction, but it's all custom. But the minimum requirement, again, is tying it to the hand, finger, and then knot it here. Okay.
When you tie it this way, it all has to stay in one piece, eh?
Not that I know of it. It's nice to have it that way. And if it has to, that's nice.
Mine never stays. It always...
I don't know that it has to stay that way. Another thing that's important to know this is because when you're talking about hefsek, when you're talking about having a separation between your hand and the tefillin, right? You can't put the tefillin on top of your shirt. But you have to make, if you're putting on tefillin with somebody, and the guy doesn't want to take his watch off, he's not comfortable. Do you have to make him take his watch off? And there's no. Because this is not part of this minimum requirement. If his watch were up here blocking the hand tefillin, you have a problem. If it was over here, even I saw here, even a ring doesn't have to be taken off. But the watch certainly doesn't have to be taken off. Because it's not part of the minimum requirement. That's to tie it here and to put it around to knot it here. It's another interesting point to know. Okay. Now let's see the other opinions. So this is all in Rashi's version. Some are more lenient. Some more lenient authorities maintain that tying or sewing disqualifies a strap only at the part that, go to the next page, it's cut off there, encircles the head, or that encircles the arm to bind the tefillin to the arm. Only the part of only literally around the head and around the actual arm where the box is. For when that part of the severed strap is tied or sewn together, the binding of the head, tefillin, and the hair tefillin cannot be considered a binding which is intact. So, in other words, Rashi interpreted that when we said that the binding has to be a beautiful binding, a complete binding, Rashi said it meant one binding and not 2. And therefore, nowhere else on your minimum requirement can you have sewing or new binding. This interpretation says no. The binding itself needs to be beautiful, needs to be wholesome. Afterwards, doesn't matter. So only the actual part, only the actual loop, which is either binding into your head or binding into your arm, is where we have this application that it has to be wholesome and beautiful. After that, even if it's within your minimum requirement, it's okay to have it sewn or knotted. As he says, by contrast, these authorities maintain or hold that with regard to the parts of the straps that hang down from the head to the chest and the navel, and which extend from the arm to the middle finger, tying or sewing is effective, even though it's part of your minimum requirement, because it's not around the loop which actually ties it to you. Are we following? It all comes down to when our sages said that the verse says that the pasuk says uksharta, but it has to be a wholesome knot. What does that mean? Rashi says 1 knot, no 2. So wherever your minimum straps are, no more tying. This interpretation says only the part that constitutes the actual loop of your tying has to be wholesome. Anything beyond that, even if it's not still part of your minimum requirement, may be tied or sewn. That wasn't Taisus, but now this is Taisus. This is Bentam. Other authorities are even more lenient and accept sewing even the parts that sever the straps and encircle the head of the arm, provided that it's the inner side which is sewn, so that the stitching not appear from the outside of the straps appears complete and is sewn with kosher sinews. Meaning to say, this is Taisus, which says even if it's within the minimum requirement, and even if it's within the loop, that makes your actual knot, so long as it retains its beauty, it's okay. And that's what Taisus' opinion was. His opinion is that the issue of having a beautiful knot is not about having 1 or not 2, but it's about aesthetics. And therefore, even if it's within the loop that ties your head tefillin to your hand, to your head, and your hand tefillin to your hand, so long as it's sewn in such a fashion that it retains its beauty, it's done on the inside, it's done with kosher materials, then it remains okay. And there are even more lenient authorities, continues Alter Rebbe, who rule that it's acceptable even if the thread is used and not a kosher animal thread. Okay, so we have all these opinions. What do we actually do? So with regard to the actual halachic ruling, one should be stringent with regard to scriptural requirement and follow the first opinion wherever possible. So Rashi, in other words, no extra knots on any part of your straps that are minimum. Even if it's not part of the binding and even if it's sewn nicely. None of that. it's a biblical commandment, and therefore go with the most strict one, Rashi. When necessary, meaning, I don't know, there's no tefillin available, and if the tefillin ripped, he has no issues, he has no other choice, one may rule more leniently and permit sewing together the underside of the part of the straps which hang from the head, for there are authorities who permit it, even for the part that encircles the head, though it's difficult to ensure that the stitching will not be visible from the outside. So he's saying like this: if it's not on the loop that binds the box to your head or your hand, then you can be lenient and do a nice stitching even if it's within the minimum hanging straps. Why? Because you're relying on two leniencies. Number one, you're relying on those who say that so long as it's not in the loop, you're allowed to do anything. Number two, you're relying on those who say that if it's a beautiful stitching, you're allowed to do anything. So if you do a beautiful stitching on the extra hanging straps, you have two reasons to be lenient, two opinions to be lenient. Number one, you're allowed to do anything there. Number two, it's a beautiful strap, it's a beautiful stitching. So you have Taisus plus the other one. I think the other one's for Truma. I don't remember. Furthermore, in a pressing situation, however, one may rely on the most lenient opinions so that he observes the mitzvah of tefillin will not be suspended. So if he has no choice, the actual strap around his head ripped, the actual strap which binds it to the actual loop which holds it to his hand ripped. So he can't tie it there, but at least go borrow, you're stuck on an island somewhere, I don't know, you're no tefillin around. I don't know, for some reason Chabad's not there yet. I don't know, you're on the moon maybe.
You're pressed for time.
Pressed for time. You find a needle thread, stitch the inside so it looks nice. At least you're relying on Tosfos, which says it's okay to do so. However, a blessing should not be recited, because according to some opinions, it's not kosher. And a blessing can only be recited when you're absolutely 100% certain you're fulfilling the commandment. And you're only absolutely 100% certain you're fulfilling the commandment if you follow all authorities. And he explains, for the blessings are not indispensable to the fulfillment of the mitzvah. Meaning to say, a person put on tefillin and forgot to make a blessing, he still fulfilled the commandment. The blessing is only a rabbinic requirement to thank Hashem for the commandment. And you can only do that if you know 100% certain that you're doing it. And therefore, in such a situation, where only according to one opinion you're fulfilling the commandment, according to Tosfos, but according to Rashi and others, you're not fulfilling the commandment. Thus, if you happen to have to, for whatever reason, stitch the inside of the loop that it straps the tefillin to your head and your arm, then put it on without a bracha. So here we have what the halacha is when your tefillin are ripped, and from there we emerged what the minimum requirement for length of tefillin, and likewise the minimum requirement for what you have to put on in your hand tefillin. Have a wonderful day, everybody.